Okay guys, so a lot of you are new here, so let me introduce myself. My name is Henry. Just make sure you all have a handout before I waffle on and you guys get confused. So the topic of it today is Jungian archetypes and the tarot. How many of you are psychology specialists here? Okay, good. So I won't say that full. I won't say like a full. No worries. So a bit of background on Jung. He's a Swiss guy who more or less revolutionized the study of psychology after Freud, mainly because he was a student of Freud's, but Freud took the really snobbishly scientific approach where he ignored everything that magic and religion, philosophy sort of developed beforehand. He ignored all of that, went his own way, whilst Carl Jung actually explored what our ancestors did through magic and incorporated it to the modern. So we're not reinventing the wheel, essentially. How many of you are familiar with ceremonial magic at all?
Well,
okay, good. Bits and bobs. But if you are like him, how you doing? Just quickly succeed. Because Carl Jung himself was a ceremonial magician for quite a bit of his life. So if you're familiar with that, when you read up on this stuff, it's actually all familiar, but he uses kind of really sciencey terminology, which I'm going to ignore for today because that confuses the hell out of me. I'm going to use more words like, like for example, he uses this term called the collective unconsciousness, which is the idea that within the deepest parts of our brains we have these pure forms of these ideas which then manifest themselves in our folklore and whatever. Say the idea of a virgin mother in Christianity became Mary, in Greek pantheon it became Artemis, and then there's the warrior, Mars, Ares. So these ideas exist in our brains as archetypes, as in their purest forms. And we express it through our subjective lens, depending on culture, race, etc. And so we attribute all these ideas. So we move up, okay. So not enough space on the sofa? Yep. Okay. Where was I? So for example, again, we all have this idea of love, beauty, and harmony. So the Greeks, all goddesses of love are manifestations of that one idea, and that's how when we have comparative religion and mythology, we see these sort of general trends, no matter what religion we go through. Although it's interesting when we look at the differences, how they differ, but at the same time how they complement that archetype in this way. So why is it important to explore this part of our minds? I'm going to use magical terminology rather than psychological, just because it's easier for us to understand. In Western alchemy, the idea is that our mind is what connects the soul to our body. Okay, and so everything the only way for our soul to express itself is through the mind, and then outwards from there on. And basically the soul seeks to express itself no matter what. And when we fail to do that, and we repress parts of ourselves, that's when neurosis and psychological problems come into being. So say if there is a part of you that is a very loving person, but you live in a very competitive environment, say, so you repress that side of yourself, what happens is, because you don't express that, it comes up in your dreams as the only way for it to have an outlet. This is a very common thing that happens in life because in human society we have cultural norms, we have rules that restrict us in all sorts of different ways, and human nature doesn't give a crap about our rules and just does its own thing. The most common example is gender roles. Everyone has masculine and feminine, but because society expects us to act in certain ways. You know, blokes can't talk about emotions. Girls have to wait for guys to ask them out. You know, and you know, even though they fancy the shit out of that guy, you know, it is. So repression is more or less happens to everyone in a certain degree. No. So what do you do about it? Well, that's why dream analysis is so important. It is that direct indication of what you yourself is not you're lacking, but what you're not expressing that you need to. Okay. That's my train of thought. Let's get a drink. Any questions so far? No? Okay, cool. Not confusing any of you. But it's kind of fairly simple stuff and how I see Jung's work. So you can say if you look yourself in a dream and you identify that, say, you know, a mother figure is prominent in your dreams. You know that there are motherly things within you are not expressing. But how this works is that, say, your brain would naturally latch on. Okay, sorry, no. Let's rewind for a sec. Say you experience a dream now. Okay. The way you analyze dreams is that the people you see in the dreams are actually facets of yourself. Okay. But say if I saw Mike in my dream, what it actually is my brain manifesting what I see in Mike, or Mike represents to me. And so, you see, so in your dream, it's actually you, but the part of you that you think that person embodies in your life. You see. So like a friend who guides you and stuff would be how your brain interprets the teacher archetype. You see. But now the trouble is that this is all subjective. Language, images is a language, and languages are arbitrary meanings that you assign to stuff. You know, they don't inherently mean anything, but it's because we choose to interpret it that way that it manifests itself. And so the hardest thing of dream analysis is because it's all so personal. You have to figure out what each symbol means to you. Now, some people manage to get around that in all sorts of different ways. One is to have a pagan religion. You embody each thing as a god or a goddess. You see, it's kind of how things work. They so that at least everyone in that culture interprets the same symbols in the same way. So, say if say we all grew up in a Christian background, Jesus came into your dream, I'll know immediately, okay, you're having these kind of repressions, you know, or if you saw Mars in your dream, you're having your masculine warrior tendencies aren't being expressed. But now, after Christianity got into power, all this got destroyed because the annoying thing is, when you only have one God, it's like taking all the letters in the alphabet and replacing it with one syllable. It is so hard to express this diversity in our minds with a monotheistic God. So how we kind of can get around that is we can use the tarot as, because they are like the pagan gods, they are manifestations of these archetypes. So if you can integrate these images so deeply into your psyche, to the point where you're dreaming about them, so you know immediately, okay, that's, you know, the thing I need to work on. I know a lot of people who work with the tarot, you know, they actually dream of stuff like the hermit and the priestess, trying to teach them how to do healing and or give spiritual guidance, you know, that sort of thing. And this just requires a lot of work in the tarot. I think pure divination is not quite enough. In order to integrate it so deeply into your psyche, to the point you're dreaming about them, I think you have to explore them directly through your imagination. Who does scrying here, or astral?
Who does?
Scrying?
What's that? Astral projection, right?
Astral projection, that sort of thing. Yeah, you know that. It's you can kind of say you're really exploring your own brain or your own imagination.
Is it like lucid dreaming a bit as well?
Yeah, I mean it's you can call it a controlled daydream. The trouble I have, especially with dreams, is like in the morning you wake up and it's like, oh, I've had this dream, but it's so early in the morning I don't want to get up, go to my desk, write it all out. And so, okay, 5 more minutes. An hour later, it's like, oh my God, I've forgotten my dream. Crap. You know, and I think that's the problem I have with dreaming. So what the ancient magicians did is that they had, lucid dreaming, this sort of controlled daydreaming, where you say you get your card, you focus on it, and then there are different techniques to do it, but basically you explore the card itself. It's easiest to do it. You imagine the card, within the card is a world, which you then just go through. Whether it is an objective reality or just a subjective, that's a philosophical argument. We can go in circles. I take the view that there is an objectiveness to each idea because human beings, we share these ideas, these archetypes. The fact that it's not just in you, and the fact that we all have the idea of a mother and a father or a hero, that they have an objective existence in itself. So I don't quite believe our brains are isolated. I mean, Alan Moore makes the idea that there's such thing as an idea space, that there is a world that all our imaginations are connected to. Our own imagination is like at the house within that world, but you can step out of that house, you see. And people, artists especially, who can invent things and create things, they're the ones who are really good at exploring that world. It's a nice analogy.
Called the collective unconscious too.
Yeah, that is basically, I think what Jung coined as the collective unconscious is the astral realm. I think he just made it sciencey so that people can accept it a bit better, which is fair enough, but it causes all sorts of other complications.
The astral doesn't really fit into his whole, well, the scientific part of his.
But that's where philosophy comes in. You have to be able to deal with things you're not really certain about, and all that stuff. I mean, where was that? I was going to talk about artists in particular. I mean, because art is so entwined into magic and into psychology. If you look at artists, tend to be the most repressed people in the world, in the sense that they have these feelings that they can't live out, so they create this. Writers, they create this world so that all this can happen. It's the same thing. You can't express yourself in the real world because, like, let's face it. Say the blokes in the room. We all want to be like heroes, yes? In our own heads, we are like, yeah, we're the shit. But how often are you going to be heroic in real life? Frankly, we have these. We can make these stories. The main characters, brave and slays dragons for a living and eats its flesh, becomes powerful, that sort of stuff. But no, artists sort of do that as well. They express whatever feelings the real world can't accommodate, essentially. And it's like, I think it was, and plenty of people like Oscar Wilde, he was gay in a world that was very homophobic, so he had something to pour his heart into. So that's the gist of the idea. I mean, I can't offer an exercise today like we usually do because it is so personal. It's just telling you, look, go on your own, explore each card in the astral realm. There are so many techniques for it, but the one I would recommend that works for me is that, so you're sitting in a meditative position in that state, and then you imagine the card as a kind of door, and then you have that body, you either physically open the door, go through it, and then you just relax and let your imagination sort of take over and see what happens. And then that in itself would, you would understand the card a lot more because you're physically exploring it, and 2, you're actively engaging your mind into it, you assimilate it into your being, that sort of thing.